Were you unable to get an internship this summer, or was your internship canceled due to COVID? If either of those two happened to you, then this is the perfect video because we'll be talking about how to find more internships and get relevant work experience so that you are going to be qualified for full-time hiring. Now, this recording that you're going to watch was part of a workshop webinar that I did with Albert's Job Listings and Referrals. And make sure you stay until the very end because I have this awesome list of resources that you can use to find internships, externships, and micro internships. Okay, enjoy. We today are going to talk about jobs for college students, and this also applies to graduates and even folks in graduate school, so MBA, master's programs, etc. So I wanted to talk about jobs and internships and opportunities that are still available and or how you can actually continue to build your experience even during COVID. And I always like to start off all these sessions. If you guys have a piece of paper or a notepad or something like that, go ahead and write down what your objective is for today's session and what it is that you're essentially trying to get out of our workshop. So go ahead and write that down. It's always good to have goals, and also it's good to keep me accountable. So if we get to the very end of the presentation, which should only take about 30 minutes or so, and I'll leave time at the end for questions, make sure that I'm addressing your questions or getting the value that you want out of the session. Alrighty, so what are we going to cover today? And you can double check this with your objective and what you're basically trying to get out of today's session, and hopefully I am covering it. First, we're going to talk about the current state of the internship market and kind of what happened because of COVID. Doing this workshop kind of at the end of the summer is actually kind of nice because I got to talk with folks at Santa Clara University's Career Center and admissions office to kind of figure out what the current state is of the market and also what is essentially happening with internships and jobs right now for college graduates. The second thing we're going to be talking about is alternative ways to get relevant work experience so that you can come out of COVID into a fresh economy, ready and qualified to get your potentially full-time role. And then, of course, what everyone is asking me about is helpful resources for college students and graduates, etc., whether that's for finding internships, networking, externships, or full-time positions. We'll cover all of that at the very, very end, and I'll make sure that folks get access to all the materials and collateral. First, let's talk a little bit about the current internships and what it has kind of shaken out to be in 2020. And so the common question that I get all the time is, are there even any internships right now, Corey? I've been hearing all these things. Everything's getting canceled. Like, what am I supposed to do, right? Turns out there are actually a lot of internships right now. So on SCU's job board, which is called, I believe it's called Handshake, there's right now 600 active internships. In the beginning of the month in September, there was 700 internships. Almost 75% of them were paid. The remaining are unpaid, but still very good experiences. In terms of industries that are still hiring, I listed them all there. The one surprising thing to me was nonprofit and HR. Those I didn't necessarily foresee to be growing over the pandemic or the illness, excuse me. But yeah, those are still hiring. In terms of companies, people are always asking where should they be looking to target. Amazon, DocuSign, McKesson, Tesla, SAP, Chegg, FireEye. They're all been posting and been very active on SCU's job board. So I'm sure for other internships and opportunities, there's a wealth there. And then my last point here too, and this is I think one of the advantages of everybody moving to a remote working or remote internship model is you can really consider working for companies that are not necessarily based in the Bay Area or wherever it is that you are currently. I think that was one of the interesting pieces, right? When you're selecting your internship, you're always conscious about, well, where do I want to be during the summer? Do I want to stay in California? Do I want to go somewhere else? Because most companies are doing remote internships, you can actually consider many different companies now, anyone that's offering internships in your field. So highly encourage you to kind of think outside the box, especially if you get to work from home and still get to build really good experience. What do you do if your internship or your job opportunity that you had was canceled because of the illness? Well, I really hope one thing you're not doing is just staying home, playing video games, watching Netflix, and feeling bad for yourself. I know that it is definitely a real bummer and it can be really disheartening, but I'm going to talk about next essentially how you can kind of get out of this rut and how you
Do
can
you want to go
position
runless?
yourself even
Do
if
you want to
your
go runless?
internship was canceled. And I would also love to see in the chats as well, right? For folks who did have their internships and stuff canceled, let us know, and then we can try and find opportunities to connect you with the right people or help you find other opportunities to get relevant experience. So, what do you do if your internship was canceled or you didn't have anything lined up for this past summer? Well, one thing you should really consider doing is keeping in touch with the recruiter that you had that you were working with, who either gave you the offer for your internship. Make sure you stay very very close with them, because once they do get additional headcount, the interns who they gave offers to previously are definitely going to be the first people that they talk to. One of the interesting things too, the folks at Santa Clara's Career Center actually recommended that you list on your resume any internships or full-time roles that you had, even if they were canceled. The reason being is it was a very competitive market, and it still is a very competitive market. And so you should get credit for the internship or job that you were able to get. I'm sure you needed to interview a lot, make sure your resume is in the right order. So you should get credit for it. And I totally agree, especially for folks who are able to get internships at really big brand name companies like the Googles, Apples, Amazons, Facebooks. Definitely should list that up on your resume for sure. And one of the other things to think about too is if your internship or work was canceled, right? What should you really be doing instead? Well, if you think about setting yourself up for success when you graduate from college, there's basically three pillars that I recommend that everybody focus on when they're in college, right? And this is how you're going to set yourself up to be like a top candidate when you graduate. So the very first pillar is your academics, right? Like your GPA, your classes, your major, etc. The second pillar that you want to make sure you're focusing on as well is your volunteer and leadership experience. And then the third pillar that you want to think about is getting relevant work experience for the field that you want to break into. So, what you should be doing right now is figuring out ways to beef up all of your experience in those three different categories, right? Maybe you want to raise your GPA up a little bit. Maybe you should take some community classes online, sign up for summer school or for additional programs, get some A's, raise that GPA up, right? Don't be afraid to volunteer, take on additional leadership experience, even in volunteer orgs, right? Or certain societies, you can get leadership positions, and then work experience. This one we're going to dive into in a lot of depth coming up next, but you can basically get relevant work experience. And relevant here is the very important part, right? Like being very strategic with the work choices that you choose to get. Don't just sign up for any type of job. It should be building relevant skill sets. And you can do that through your own entrepreneurial ideas, micro internships, which I'll explain in a few slides as well, and then also networking, right? Even if you already have a job lined up, networking, no one has ever said you can do too much networking, right? And so you can always set yourself up for either the job that you have right now or the job that you may want 2 or 3 moves from today. And the last thing, which I think is kind of a revelation, is that you can even create your own version of an internship if you're really really looking to get that same type of experience and that type of exposure. And so, what is or how do you create your own internship? Cool. So, how do you create your own internship? And this is a relatively new concept, right? And it's just one way to get relevant experience. But if you think about it, what is an internship at its core, right? It's really just three different things. So, the first thing is that there's some structure and mentorship that's assigned to you for a specific period of time, typically like 6 to 8 weeks. The second thing is it's a way for you to learn applicable and relevant skills for the job that you're eventually going to get when you graduate. And then thirdly, you get to work on real world problems, and there's like an actual stake, right? So the difference that I like to say is when you're in class doing a project, if you were to screw up or make a mistake, nothing really happens, right? There's no consequences. But if you're doing an actual project for a company, they give you real data to use. You're working with real people in the marketing department, etc. If you make a mistake, you can actually impact the company. And so that's the other piece that the internship kind of, or the other piece of value that internships can provide. Right. So, how do you essentially create your own internship? Well, if you're looking to get a mentor, create some structure, you can create the structure on your own by building your own internship. You can find a mentor through networking, right, which we talked about on the previous slide as well. How do you gain relevant skills? Well, you should be doing relevant types of projects, and I'll break that down in a bit as well. But you can take extra courses, you can get certifications, you can do extra classes, you can work for free. And then how do you get like real world experience? Well, that's where externships, micro internships, and things like that come into play. So, how do you do that? And this slide, I'm actually super, super proud of. I did a lot of research, and didn't see any universities actually posting content or creating content like this. And this is something that I think is going to be super valuable. Take a picture of this for sure, write it down. On the left here, I've got your typical, I would say, corporate functions in a company, right? Sales, marketing, finance, etc. And on the right are what I would deem to be easily accessible jobs, pre-COVID, post-COVID, both are the same, where I think a college student could actually get in order to gain relevant experience to be qualified in that particular field. And so I can just walk you through some of these like very, very quickly, right? So sales, one of the cool things about sales is there's no degree requirement, meaning you can really major in almost anything in school and qualify for a sales role. MLM stands for multi-level marketing, also known as the pyramid marketing companies. Yes, it is a thing. I even did it my sophomore summer. I didn't have any internships or things lined up, so I did some MLM for the summer. Honestly, some of the best hands-on sales experience you can probably ever get. I had to knock on people's doors. I had to cold call people. I had to organize events. I had to speak in front of 10 to 20 different people. I had to sell them products, right? I didn't make any money if I didn't sell anything. I had to make sure that their shipments got there on time. I was focusing on getting renewals, a whole bunch of stuff. And so if you just keep looking through this list, I tried to create as many interesting but also highly accessible jobs for college students, graduate students, etc. And you can even do a lot of these during school. Marketing, that's actually one of my favorites because you can easily gain a lot of the social media marketing experience kind of on your own, whether you're helping your favorite coffee shop or doing your own social media like agency. I've met kids in like elementary school who have YouTube social media marketing companies, right? Finance, one thing that people don't think about, right? Selling insurance, that's really great experience. You can day trade, get your real estate license. Um, for software engineering, a lot of these tend to be more entrepreneurial stuff, right? Like building an app, etc. But if you do live in a place with a data center, I know that they are hiring quite frequently for part-time work, especially. IT, right? For those folks who are interested in IT, which is a really hot field right now as well. Geek Squad, remote Apple support. Like you can sit at in your house, take phone calls, help people fix their iPads and their iPhones, right? That's a huge, huge market. HR, I mentioned, is actually one of the booming industries even during COVID. Well, and it makes sense, right? Because there's so many employee questions that people have to deal with, set up employee processes, etc. I've seen a lot of payroll postings in Albert's list recently. And so I think there's highly accessible jobs in the field to get really good experience. This next question, right, and I think this is super popular, and this was even a popular topic in 2008, 2009, was when people were having trouble finding jobs when they immediately graduated. They were thinking, well, I'll just go get I'll just go get an MBA or I'll just go get a master's in something. And so people have been asking me, well, should I just go to grad school if I wasn't able to get a job or an internship or anything like that? And as it says on the slide, I think it honestly really does depend. And I actually just created or posted a new video on my YouTube channel about getting an MBA and if it's really worth it. So you guys can check that one out if you're thinking about getting an MBA. But basically, what I like to recommend folks is if you are getting into a really technical field like accounting, like a master's in accounting is actually a great thing to get, whether there's COVID or not COVID, because sometimes you don't graduate with enough credits to sit for the CPA. Or if you want to do something in engineering, whether that's software, hardware, civil, mechanical, etc., grad school, I actually think is worth it. And if you weren't able to get a job, COVID does set you up nicely to go and do some of that. But if you're not trying to get into like investment banking, venture capital, or things like that, right? I really don't necessarily feel like it's worth it if you can find alternative ways to get the relevant skills that you need to be qualified for the role. And if you're like, well, Corey, how do I get those skills? I mean, on the previous slide, I gave you a bunch of different jobs that are relatively accessible that you can do to actually get those skills, right? And one thing to kind of think about as well is if you are going to go to grad school, make sure that you're 100% or 110% even sure that this is actually your dream job or a job that you really, really want. Don't go to grad school just because you don't want to have a gap on your resume, because you're going to be putting yourself further and further sometimes into debt. You may be taking essentially 2 years off of your career, depending on how long your program is, right? There's a lot of opportunity costs that you want to consider. And so just make sure that you're really, really certain that this job is one that you are highly motivated to go out and go get. And the last thing too is make sure you're very conscious of where you're getting your master's degree or your graduate degree from. Each university is kind of known for certain specialties and has, a ranking that you can also look for as well. Like Stanford is really known for entrepreneurs. Wharton, UPenn is known mostly for like banking or venture capital and things like that. So also make sure you're investing your money in the right ways. So um, hopefully that was some helpful information as well for those folks who are thinking about going to grad school. All right, so let's go through a quick little case study so we can apply some of the information that we learned so far. So this is Jill. Everyone say hi to Jill. Hi, Jill. So Jill is a marketing major at Santa Clara University who just graduated in July this year. So July 2020. She unfortunately didn't have a full-time role lined up, but she really wants to get into social media marketing as her first job. So put it down in the chat. What do you think Jill should do? Should she A, study and apply to get a master's degree in marketing? B, should she take online courses to teach her how to do social media marketing? There's Udemy, Masterclass, LinkedIn's certifications, etc. Should she C, do social media marketing for free for her favorite coffee shop that she lives right next to? Or D, should she be driving for Lyft just to make some money? The correct answer here is B and C, honestly. D is nice if you have the time. A, I don't necessarily think a master's degree is necessarily worth it, particularly if you're trying to get into social media marketing, where you can get a lot of those tangible skills by just working. And even still, like if you go to a master's program, they're not necessarily going to teach you like how do you set up a Facebook ad, right? What makes a good social media ad? How do you create a good Instagram campaign, etc. So a lot of that you're going to have to learn by doing. Taking courses will obviously just help you accelerate and learn a whole lot faster without wasting too much money running bad ads. But honestly, C is really your money maker. People are going to want to see your tangible experience and work products, as well as relevant work experience with business context. Remember when I was talking about how do you create your own internship for yourself? One of the big key differentiators is putting something at stake, right? And so I think C is honestly where you should be investing a lot of your time to build that skill set. D is nice if you have the time and you can afford to do it. I think it's also really good to give you additional income so you can run more ads, whether that's for the coffee shop or to learn about marketing. Gary Vaynerchuk talks a lot about this process as well. How does one pay their bills while taking online classes and working for free? Yeah, so maybe you will need to take up some type of part-time work, or if you can reduce your expenses, stay with your parents, cut costs that way. Um, People can get really, really creative. You can sell stuff that you don't need on eBay. You can go garage sailing. Well, I guess that's kind of shut down right now. But yeah, there's lots of different ways to generate a little bit of money, so you can do some of this stuff. So lastly, and this is something that I think a lot of people have been probably salivating and waiting for, is some resources that you can use right now. So covintern.com, I believe actually this someone posted that very early on in like March or April in Albert's list. So this has a running list right now of available internships within the United States, I believe. And Candor, which also was in Albert's list, I think relatively recently, has a list of the companies that are not doing hiring freezes or are not in hiring freezes, as well as companies that are in hiring freezes. And that's crowdsourced also, right? So some of it you may want to fact check as well. Talent Board IO. This one was really interesting. So this is basically a forum or a website where people who had their internships canceled can find either additional internships or other job opportunities. And employers are really hot on this one as well, because the rationale here is if you were essentially vetted by another company to get an internship, most likely you're probably already a top candidate. And so they're really looking to hire folks who had internships or other opportunities that were canceled. Make sure you're fully leveraging your alumni center or career center at your alma mater, even if you graduated 5, 10 years ago. I know at Santa Clara University, we all have basically lifetime access to the career center and the career coaches and counselors. A lot of universities have Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, things like that. So make sure you're joining those. It's honestly a really easy way to network and find job opportunities. Parker Dewey. So this is one that I hadn't heard about until I had to do some research for this presentation. So both Parker Dewey and Inside Sherpa, they have remote internships and externships and micro internships that you can sign up for. So micro internships, this is something that kind of emerged in like the last few years or so, but essentially a micro internship is a fixed term assignment in which you would work for a company and complete a project that's typically given to interns or like new hires. So some of the more simpler projects, yes, but very tangible, relevant experience that you can get. And if you do enough of these micro internships, it actually can really elevate your profile and resume to get you set up for success when there is hiring that's opening back up again. Biginterview.com, that's a place where you can practice virtual interviews. And I did actually create a video last week on how to set yourself up for successful video interviews. And so you can also check out my YouTube channel as well as just CareerShakers, all one word. You can check out my company website too, CareerShakers.com. In terms of the timing of internship applications and full-time roles, so last when I spoke with the Santa Clara Career Center, they weren't necessarily sure what the deadline will be. Typically, internship hiring was done in the fall. So it would be happening probably around October timeframe. But because of the pandemic and things, there's rumors that they're going to be shifting a lot of the hiring into the winter season. So January, February. So what that really means for you is you actually have another 3 to 4 months right now to continue to build up your resume through internships, externships, projects, volunteering, etc. So that's why even if you're thinking, oh, the summer's over, like there's nothing I can do now, I'm just going to keep playing video games. No, there's still a lot more progress that you can do, especially if you can crank out a few of these micro internships all at the same time. Oh, and I think some micro internships are paid opportunities. And in terms of time frame or like time commitment, it can vary from like 5 hours up to like 40 hours a week, depending on the types of projects and things that you take on. So yeah, it's also a really great way to make some money while getting tangible, relevant skill sets. All right, so that's the resources part. So that's basically covers, I think, almost everything that I committed to covering at the beginning of the call. So before we get into the Q&A session, let's just take a quick moment. I'll recap, and then you can look through your objective that you wrote down at the very beginning to see if you got the information and you got the value that you wanted. And if not, the Q&A session, I'll definitely make sure that you get that. So what did I cover today? We talked about the current state of the job and internship market. Companies are still hiring. There are some hiring freezes, but there's definitely opportunities and work to go around for everybody. We talked about what to do if your internship is canceled and how you can get or continue to build relevant skill sets and experience so that when the economy is 100% back open again, it's going to be super competitive. So make sure that you're setting yourself up that way. And then we also covered how to get relevant skills, which is my beautiful slide there, which talks about all the different highly accessible jobs to get relevant skill sets: marketing, sales, HR, finance, etc. And then the resources slide, which we talked about last time. Someone said, when you have a remote job, does the employer generally set up you with a chair or a desk, etc.? It'll depend on the company and what budget they've allowed for basically work from home kits. I know the larger companies, medium to larger companies, a lot of the public companies, I should say, have been providing some stipends for work from home. If you're doing a micro internship or externship, I don't believe you will get any type of stipend for like a new desk or a chair or something like that, but it doesn't hurt to ask. Is social media a necessary? Sorry, yeah. So the question that someone asked earlier is social media a necessity in the job market these days? I do think a LinkedIn, 100% absolutely necessary. I don't think any other form of social media other than GitHub, if you guys are an engineer of some sort, not necessarily, I would say not necessary, but you should be very cognizant of what is up on your social media. A lot of companies will do pseudo background checks. They may look at your Facebook or your Instagram and things like that if it is easily accessible and searchable. So just make sure that you have work appropriate content up on there. But 100%, everybody should have a LinkedIn. There's no question about it. I know some people were worried about privacy and they don't want to be on social media. I wouldn't necessarily consider LinkedIn to be a pure social media platform. Yes, you can comment on people and like give updates, but it's really mostly used by recruiters and professionals. And it honestly, the benefits far outweigh any potential downsides, especially considering I got a lot of my opportunities and jobs through LinkedIn where recruiters can come and find you. So 100% everybody needs a LinkedIn. Diana asks, how about corporate training or development? That is an area. So I have seen um, that there's I think it's like a master's degree in behavioral or clinical psychology. I know that that's been very, very helpful for a lot of folks who have become corporate trainers or basically went to work in learning and development, or people development, as we call it at my company. So that's something you may want to consider. It's not a necessity, but it is very helpful. And I've noticed a trend that a lot of our corporate trainers do have that type of master's degree. You can also just start in other departments within HR and then gain that generalist skill set from being like an HR business partner, HR generalist, and then you can transition over into corporate training or development. I've seen a lot of people within my company transition from HR business partner roles into learning and development. So, not a master's is not necessary, but it is helpful. How about a master's in cybersecurity? Oh, yeah, I think it is a highly technical field, so I do think a master's degree would definitely be beneficial. I'm sure, though, you could also break into that without getting a master's degree if not necessary. It's not 100% necessary, depending on your current skill set, Vicky, and how adept you are already in the field. Maybe you're already in some type of engineering role, and you're just trying to switch into cybersecurity. I can see you doing or being qualified for micro internships, externships, just doing additional project work, working for, another startup for free on the weekend or something to kind of get that experience as well. What are your thoughts on pursuing an MBA? Currently a senior studying hospitality and tourism management. Passionate about the field of hospitality because I'm allowed to work with people and teams. Um, I think it depends. Like, what are you planning on doing with your MBA when you graduate within hospitality and tourism? In that space, I mean, I think just having a bachelor's degree sometimes, honestly, is enough to kind of set you apart from everybody else. I'm not sure if there are barriers to entry or ceilings that you'll hit because you don't have an MBA when you want to get into higher level management. Although I've seen a huge trend recently, especially here in the Bay Area, where there's been less of a focus on degrees and more focus on experience and core competencies to be successful in the role. And in general, when you're thinking about getting an MBA, there's really like 4 or 5 fields where I think it is 100% worth the money. So if you're trying to get into investment banking, management consulting, venture capital, private equity, those types of things, I really do think the best way to break in there is with an MBA, just because the barriers to entry are so high. And in order to get relevant skill sets to make you qualified, you really can only get that by already being in that field. So it's kind of like a catch 22. So I really do think an MBA is necessary for those roles. Outside of that, I don't necessarily know if it's relevant for hospitality and tourism. I know that that industry is probably taking a huge beating right now, but hopefully when everything turns around, and I can actually see, depending on what type of role you want to get, maybe you would consider going back to I can see like sales, customer service is definitely a skill set you're going to need in that field. So maybe you may want to consider doing some of those sales roles. If you want to do marketing for your, I guess, hotel or company that you're working for, right? You can get, I feel like a lot of that experience through other types of work. Oh, is it good to post on LinkedIn? What types of things could be good for visibility and professional engagement? I do think it's good to be active on LinkedIn. I know some recruiters look at the recommendation section down at the bottom of your LinkedIn to see who's recommended and talked about your work, etc. Gave you high praise. I think that is very good. Posting on LinkedIn, I do think if you're creating or generating thought provoking or market leading content or insights, especially like if you're farther along in your career, it can get you really good visibility, even sometimes speaking engagements, things like that, right? If you can create an opinion, a valid opinion, of course, that gives insights about either the industry, where it's going, market trends, what you're hearing from customers, how you want to see products evolve over time. I do think that type of content is definitely helpful and gets you the right type of visibility. I think the wrong type of visibility is if you're using your status bar, kind of like Facebook, right, to talk or complain about certain things or talk negative about certain companies. I don't think it's necessarily the best platform to be used that way. Do I recommend getting a resume professionally written? I think it depends, and it's it's funny because I'm a career coach, so I think it depends on where your problem areas may lie. So the first thing I would say is you should figure out where it is in your job search you're running into your barrier, right? If you are applying for jobs and you're getting opportunities to meet with recruiters and talk to hiring managers, then I would say your resume is probably not the problem. It's more interviewing. If you're not getting those opportunities, then probably it's the resume, or you're applying for the wrong type of job or level of job. And that's why you're not getting contacted back. So, and also depends on how long you've been on the job market. If you've been searching for a few months now, maybe you would consider getting a coach to help you break through those barriers and make progress.